the passage of such an act?
The last memory that I have of this issue was a deadlock as to what is meant by strategic commodity. Which commodities can one ever include in such a listing of strategic commodities? After that particular discussion, I lost track of it. I don't think a bill was ever passed. Again, I lost track of it after that because we couldn't just agree at that stage which commodities. That's why I gave you the example I gave, where one of the things I said was that toilet tissue could be a strategic commodity. And then I lost track of that debate, whether it was consummated and an act passed. I'm not sure. I don't think an act was actually passed.
But did it strike you in any way that the president was desirous of accumulating more power as a system person? Did your analysis in any way show that the management of the country was being done in such a way that was stifling the growth of democracy?
No, for me, at the time, I didn't see it that way. My own thought was there are certain items, certain commodities that ought to be classified as strategic. And if we were to do that, the policy that we design around how we treat those commodities will then take into account the strategic implication that they may have for Liberia. The problem was, so which commodities do we consider as strategic? That was the problem. But the concept of certain commodities being classified as strategic, and therefore the way we treat them will have to be slightly different from the way we treat non-strategic or routine items. And the list of strategic commodities in my mind could not be a long list. But again, the debate it didn't end.
But the main idea was that making the president the sole decider of whether such a commodity would be declared strategic or not, leaving out the legislature, divesting the legislature of its constitutional prerogative.
But that was not the way the discussion was going, that it will leave out the legislature. How can one classify a commodity strategic to this republic and the president alone will deal with it? It's not possible.
That's why the proposed act said, granted it may not have been passed, but there was much.
So I don't think that act passed. And if it didn't pass, you know why it didn't pass?
Why?
Because nobody wants to do a situation where one man will decide what happens to us on a strategic commodity. That was some of the things that were being discussed. A strategic commodity is not the purview of a president to, if we declare any item here strategic, as to how we manage that commodity, how we make decisions about it, cannot be left to the president alone. It's strategic to the nation. And the president alone cannot decide our fate.
So, with all the...
Let me tell you something else. If a commodity is declared strategic, and that commodity, assuming that it's one of those items that is not commonly found in the world, whichever country we import that commodity from, that country becomes strategic to our interest. Those were the kind of concept that we're dealing with. If you say rice is a strategic commodity for Liberia, then those countries from which we get rice, or those countries that have the potential to supply that particular commodity, become strategic to our country. That was the concept, that we just can't have an open policy of just moving along as if to say we got no strategic interest. So once we find a commodity, we say this is strategic, and it's a hard to find commodity, but country X is producing it, we better make friends with our country. That was the context. It was not to give president power.
Now you talk about being involved in the restructuring of the military. Now you can recall that there was quite extensive public debate on the status of forces agreement, and there was a lot of public disquiet when this status of forces agreement came into place, which limited, in a way abrogated, the Abuja peace agreement. giving the prerogative, giving the president the sole prerogative to restructure the military. And of course, you were with the government from its election, 97, up to its demise, I suppose. What can you say was the outcome of such? Well, not what was the outcome of such, but what was the reasoning in pushing such a status of forces agreement, giving the president, according to his argument at the time, the sovereign right? But we saw that the exercise of that sovereign right led us to war, and with disastrous effects, such that today we still have the legacy of, still faced with the legacy of what would have been something else had that exercise been allowed to proceed as had been envisioned under the Abuja Peace Accord.
Well, the agreement did not give the sole right to the government of Liberia, so to speak, by extension the president, to restructure the armed forces of Liberia. The Abuja Accord did not say that, neither the Accra Accord. They didn't say that the government of Liberia will restructure the army.
Let me correct myself. I'm saying that the president claimed, as leader of a sovereign country, it was his sovereign right to restructure the armed forces of Liberia and security apparatuses of Liberia, not necessarily in conformity with the dictates of the Abuja Peace Accord, which accorded to ECOWAS through ECOMOG the authority to work on the restructuring of the Liberian military and security apparatuses.
Yeah, but Mr. Taylor was wrong, because the Abuja Accord did not say that the president of Liberia or that the government of Liberia will restructure the armed forces of Liberia. Abuja Accord didn't say that, so he was wrong.
Granted, he was wrong, but he persisted.
He attempted to do that, it didn't work.
But we didn't. What was
and so Mr. Taylor gave instructions to the Minister of Defense in late 2007, early 2008, to go and restructure the army. I mean, I'm sorry, 1998, 1998, he gave instruction to Minister Chie to go restructure the army. Yeah, but the accord did not say that you will give instruction to go restructure army. So what did Mr. Chie do? He started restructuring the army, it fell apart. He started shooting in the streets.
You mean which accord, the SOFA or the Abuja Peace Accord?
The SOFA is not about restructuring the army. The agreement I talk about restructuring the army is the Abuja Accord.
Yes.
The SOFA is a completely different ballgame. It's the relationship between peacekeeping force and the government, not about restructuring the army.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, so Mr. Taylor, contrary to the Abuja Accord, decided that.
What I'm saying is, I saw in it a link between the SOFA and the Abuja Accords. SOFA governing the conduct and behavior of ECOMOG forces in Liberia, under which it would exercise the mandate to restructure the military. So while the SOFA did not necessarily talk about restructuring, it was implicit, in my view, to the SOFA, yes, that in accordance with what had been agreed, the forces would be restructured. However, along certain lines, ECOMOG will do this, ECOMOG will do that, and so on and so on. But on the assumption of office by Mr. Taylor, he claimed that the agreement, Abuja agreement, in that respect, violated the sovereign right of the president to carry out this exercise.
Yeah, I see your confusion. And I see it clearly because this is something that I work with, that I've studied. As I keep saying, and I hope I'm not saying this too often unnecessarily, I'm a systems analyst. So whenever I get an assignment of that nature, that magnitude, I engage in the system analysis mode. What went wrong with the restructuring of the AFL vis-a-vis all the agreements? The Abuja agreement provided that the AFL will be restructured before election. That did not happen. After election, you now have, quote-unquote, a constitutional government. But the accord said that the restructuring should take place before election. It didn't happen. So we had a conflict where now President Taylor is now saying that I have the sovereign authority and I cannot surrender that to an external force to restructure the army. That's where the confusion started.
Yes.
All right. So Taylor went ahead and decided to instruct, in keeping with his authority as commander-in-chief, to restructure the army. They started the process and then it collapsed. They couldn't make it. And I remember very well when the shooting started in BTC, they were trying to pay some people off, trying to delete some name of the payroll, and the whole thing became a mess. Taylor called a meeting with the then Speaker of the House, Andrew McCumberland, the Vice President, myself as Director of Cabinet, the Minister of Defense, and he had this round table. And the Minister of Defense tried to explain what they were doing that went sour. At the end of that discussion, Mr. Taylor instructed me to chair the committee that would restructure the army. That's when I got involved. And the first thing we did was to analyze what had gone wrong. That analysis was done, and we found out that the restructuring of the army should have been done prior to the sitting of the government. The way that the defense people were doing it was void of international participation, and we outlined all the things that went wrong. And what was needed was a commission. We made that preliminary report. Mr. Taylor approved the report that we need a commission. That's how come the AFL Restructuring Commission was created. And I chaired it. Now the commission gets to work and it began to design the restructuring plan consistent with international standards. By this time, ECOWAS is on board, the US military mission is on board, and other factors. And we came up with a plan. In the middle of trying to put the plan in place, by 1998, January, February 98, another war has started in Lofa. You cannot be structuring an army that is fighting. So the whole effort to restructure the army had to be halted. When we went to Accra in 2003, the issue of restructuring the army came up again. And that phrase that the AFL shall not be disbanded or dissolved is the non-state factions will be dissolved. The AFL will instead be restructured, and the United States will play the lead role in restructuring. That's the text of the Accra Accord. When we came to Monrovia, and the process of restructuring, first disarming the factions and all of that took place. You know, this is the thing about Liberia. We don't do things properly. We always try to bypass the system. There was a bypassing of the system when we came to Monrovia, and it backfired. So the plan that was developed was set aside. Somewhere in the plan they deviated. It is that deviation now that giving us this headache we have. Now, we don't have the time now for me to go into all the details of how we deviated from the plan on how to restructure the army, but we deviated.
What are the implications for peace and stability in the long run?
Serious implications. Very serious implications. There is a way to do things. There is a way to do things. If you don't do them right, they will not work. What I learned in the process of restructuring the AFL, there's a way to restructure an army. If you don't do it that way, you have problems.
So you, in other words, believe that there ought to be a restart or take a fresh look at what we have currently and see how that can be
let me just say something.
dovetailed into the original plan.
Let me say something. Restructure the AFL. The plan was just in the synopsis. Divide the army into the soldiers into two categories: the war recruits and the regular soldiers. That can be done technically, and that was done. Some 9,000 plus war recruits, people who were recruited after the war started. More than 9,000. The rest of them were people who were in the army prior to the war. Those are your regular soldiers. So you have well, almost 6,000 plus regular soldiers, 9,000 plus war recruits. The war recruits should be subjected to demobilization procedures, and the procedures are known militarily. There are military procedures and protocol as to how you demobilize soldiers. Liberia has had 4 examples of demobilization dating as far back as the early 30s. And the way we handled demobilization in the past had to be slightly different from the way you handle this one, because this one, you're talking civil war. So you have to demobilize these 9,000 plus differently from how you did it in the past 3 examples. As for the regular soldiers, if you demobilize the 9,000 plus, your caseload comes to 6,000. The 6,000 are your regular soldiers. The 6,000 need to be subjected to the normal military procedure of restructuring an army. To restructure the army, you have to decommission certain units that you put in place to fight war. No war, so you decommission them. You have to retire soldiers that have reached the retirement in keeping with law. Some of them by age, others by tenure. You have to retire them. If you put them through the retirement procedures, almost all of the army will be eligible for retirement. Now this is where the problem comes in now. Then you'll still be left with a residual. Those that are not old enough to be retired, neither have they served the tenure to be retired. So that would be your quote unquote, your core unit. And they'll be very small, maybe 300, maybe 1,000 maximum from the statistics that we had at that time. This 1,000, subject it to the conditions for the new army. And the conditions for the new army are different from previous times. One of the major issues for the new army is you must be literate to be in the new army. This 1,000 that you have, also you must be at a certain age. So you may find that the 1,000, some of them are above the entry age for the new army. They now qualify. So you have to discharge them honorably. Some of them may not be literate. They may not meet the educational qualification. They cannot join the new army. So you have to identify them and retire them honorably. By the time you do all of that, you may have just a handful that are qualified to be in the new army. Another variable that was introduced, you must have a clean human rights record. By the time you do all of this, you will find out that there are hardly any old army personnel left. Does that suggest that the army has been dissolved? No. The other element, what is the cost for demobilizing the 9,000? We did a calculation, came out to 18 million. Not the regular soldiers, the war recruits. You're talking 18 million. Where do you get 18 million dollars from to pay war recruits? So we went to the Libyans. That's the Judy Bryant time. The Libyans, they couldn't help much in terms of cash infusion because what you're giving them is cash. We went to the Americans. The Americans were in sympathy. They could provide the funds needed, but they cannot retire your people. American taxpayers' dollar cannot be used to retire people. So we cannot give you the money to retire. We went to the Nigerians and the Ghanaians and the South Africans. The money to demobilize was provided, about 11 million plus, and that was paid. DynCorp, which had the agreement, supervised that. Every member of the war recruit received a check, and the check was cashed here at the bank. They signed a statement that as of now you are no longer a member of the AFL. You have been demobilized. They gave them a demobilization card and all of that. At the 9,000. The regular soldiers, what do you give General Boeing or General Ware or General Kaman? These are regular soldiers. The policy is they should be retired with dignity so that young people coming into the army will look forward to retirement as something to to emulate. So what do you give them? Do the cost analysis, you come up with another 10 million. The Americans say, we cannot give you money to retire your people. So what you do, there's a deviation now. Reclassify the plan. Don't call it retirement. Call it what? Call it severance. If you call it severance, we'll give you the money because we are trying to help Liberia. But as soon as you call it retirement, our law prohibit U.S. taxpayers' money retiring foreigners. We'll not give you the money. So we changed the label of the program to severance. And the money was paid. Well, these retired soldiers are saying we got our severance pay. Where is our retirement pay? Do you have a law dealing with retirement of soldiers? Hardly that. So they want a retirement pay. And you're talking about people that have served for 30, 40, 50 years. You want to retire them. It's a big problem. In the meantime, we have created the Veteran Bureau. And the Veteran Bureau is not about ex-combatants. It's not about non-state fighters. The Veteran Bureau is about soldiers that are retired with dignity and honor, who fought wars to protect the sovereignty of the state. Well, we got 6,000 soldiers, Liberian soldiers, that must be retired honorably and honored, given certificate of dignity. And somebody said, but they were the one who cut the heads off. Well, don't worry about that now. That's behind us now. TRC, that's your case, Lord. Liberian people are saying, how can we be paying these people? They don't want killing people, and we found dead body in the streets. Then we can't retire them and give them and call them veterans. When President Selly sent out the bill, the veteran program was supposed to cover the war recruits. We said no, you cannot mix regular soldiers with war recruits. You don't do that in the army. Where the war recruits who receive their little handouts are still out there. Another thing that happened, the UN disarmed the warring factions. And you know what the UN is doing, the international community, they're paying these people, they are training them, giving them capacities to do their business, to go to school. What about those that were in the AFL? This 9,000 plus. Is anybody willing to train them so that they can reintegrate as we are doing with the ex-combatants? As we speak now, no. They are the one agitating. Then the president said that we should make them part of the veteran program. No, you can't make these people veterans. How do you make a veteran with somebody like, and you stand beside General Boeing? The two of them are veterans? Something not right. Where are the Americans? In the meantime, the net effect of all this reduction, take out the war recruits, retire the people, amounted to zero left. What happened to the AFL, the old AFL? Some people are saying that the old AFL has been dissolved. Technically, no. Members of the old AFL have been retired. Yeah, but nobody left. And then you're starting from zero. That's the problem we have now.
I suppose it's not as intractable as it may appear, though.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not.
Okay, my last two questions. May I ask, as someone who were involved at that level, did any such matters like involvement in Sierra Leone, in Guinea, in Ivory Coast, did any such matters figure in cabinet discussions? And what was the position of the cabinet on such matters?
First of all, no such matter ever was discussed by the cabinet, the war business. Secondly, I stayed 200 miles away from war business. I don't know nothing about war business. I don't want to know about it. don't like violence. My political life, I stay away from anything that will suggest use of force to achieve political ends. I find it distasteful, and I never got myself caught up in war matters and all of that.
So in other words, it was Mr. Taylor, basically, and a few trusted
You know something?
commanders or advisors.
When I got in the mansion, Mr. Taylor riding in the streets, and people lined up holding guns in their hands. And I said, Mr. Taylor, is this a civilian government or a military regime? All these things with people holding guns, it's not going to work. My dear friend and brother, it's not going to work. I remember one time he went to New Coup Town and there were some soldiers standing on top of the New Coup Town town hall with these long guns in their hands, and I shook my head. How can you do this? President moving down the road and there's RPG and all the kind of thing around him. It's not going to work. It didn't work.
So as an outsider, so to speak, to the NPFL, how were you treated? How were you looked at? Were you looked at as an outsider with a prying nose to know what's going on inside, or you were accepted as part of the fold?
I was never accepted as part of the fold. I was part of the government, and that was it. Nobody ever ill-treated me or said anything nasty to me, and I didn't mince my comments if I had an opportunity to say something to any of the people that were in the NPFL. We are all friends and buddy, but there's a divide. Even between Charles Taylor and myself, there is a divide. I'm not into military business. I don't like guns.
So who would you say then were the top decision makers
Of
the government at the time? Crucial decisions, key policies.
well, there was a cabinet, all right, with all the ministries involved. In the mansion, I don't think I ever participated in all of the meetings Mr. Taylor had for consultations. Those in which I participated in terms of consultations, I made my honest contribution in the line of the workings of a civil government, never in the line of military decision making. I never participated in any form of military decision making around Mr. Taylor. And Mr. Taylor knew my stance on these things, so he never got me involved. I was always in the civil side of things.
Now, lastly, when the government of the NPP came to power, like other governments, like the previous government, headed the People's Redemption Council government, inherited liabilities from the previous government, from the topple government, and in a way addressed itself to those liabilities. And likewise, when the NPP government came into place, it also had the responsibility to inherited previous liabilities. And through the 6 years of the government of Mr. Taylor, there were some liabilities that were addressed, paid to foreign businessmen and what have you. As a key person in that government, and as somebody who served in the previous government, did any such discussion come to the fore about the Taylor government? Although the government had been demonized and all of that, but did any such discussion come to the fore about the National Savings Bond Scheme, which had been launched by the Doe government, requesting the Liberian people to come to the aid of government, paying the earnings into this scheme. Did any such discussion of the National Savings Bond Scheme, did it ever feature in any of your cabinet deliberations? And now today you are an official, a senator, I suppose, decision maker, responsible to allocate resources.
Senator, you suppose?
No, not senator, I suppose. Decision maker, I suppose.
Okay.
Senator de facto, de jure.
Okay, thank you.
Has it ever figured in any of your deliberations that the government of Liberia has a responsibility to its citizens, and that this is a matter that should have been placed on the table by previous government? Is there any reason why that matter was kept in limbo?
To the best of my memory, the issue of settling savings bonds, which is a carryover liability from the Doe regime, never came up in any of the cabinet meetings, to the best of my knowledge. I was not a member of the National Budget Committee. I was not involved in the financial planning of the government. So I don't have any knowledge on that issue coming to the fore. There were obligations from the previous administration. I don't remember a strong advocacy to settle the obligations of the Doe regime or even the regime of the councils of states. I remember, though, there was an attempt by Nathaniel Barnes when he was Minister of Finance. I don't remember the year now, but maybe some of you can remember. And the issue of paying obligation of NPRAG popped into the process.
Yes.
And of course, everybody went wild, including myself. And they took it out. They took it out. Now, whether it was paid surreptitiously through other type of channels that one could not detect, I don't know. But when Mr. Barnes, the Minister of Finance, tried to recognize NPRAG obligation, the obligation of the government of the Republic, there was massive reaction to it, and I think they abandoned that plan.
So is this matter on your plate?
Come again?
So is this matter on your plate?
On my plate?
Yes, on your legislative plate. Having come from the position as a contributor to the scheme, which you did,
You know,
a policy, a top level official in the successor government, and now a senator, an elected official in this government. Does it figure anywhere on your legislative agenda?
it's good you asked that question. Since I've been in the Senate, almost every budget that we have passed, we have put in millions to pay quote-unquote domestic debts.
Mostly to foreigners, I suppose. Please correct me if I am mistaken.
Last budget hearing, I served as chairman on appropriations subcommittee of the Ways and Means of the Senate, and I'm the chairman on appropriations. So this is an issue that falls squarely on my agenda. I asked the Minister of Finance, you're settling these domestic debts. Do we have a listing of those that you are paying? Yes, we have a listing. Can we see the listing? There's a big listing. So, I haven't seen that listing yet. But it'll be interesting to see who all are being paid. And we have spent pretty close to 10, 12 million. Perhaps more than that on domestic debt. Who are we paying? Domestic debt? To spend 12 million plus paying domestic vendors. It's a serious infusion of money, and this is cash. It would be interesting to know who all have been paid. It would be interesting. As we speak now, I don't know. Can I get the information? Yes, I can. Definitely I can. If I ask the Ministry of Finance and really push it, they will.
Do you intend to push it? Do you intend to do anything about it?
Do the Liberian people want me to push that? You think the Liberian people would like for me to push that?
You want to place this to a referendum? I would think so.
No, it's a serious thing. In politics, when you begin to push an issue, you have to measure, especially those of us who are sensitive about public opinion and what the people say. When you grab an issue, if you're not careful, you will be destroyed politically simply because you didn't know which way the public may go. There are some issues where, on a matter of principles, even if the public will vote you out of office, you stand your ground. There are some issues like that.
But if the public has not rioted for you paying domestic debt, mostly to foreign businessmen, why would the public be up in arms when government is paying its own people?
So last budget season, we set into motion a process to get the Ministry of Finance to become accountable for funds that have been provided prior. The budget is received by the legislature on May 20th, thereabout. There's not much you can do until the fiscal year closes so that you can get the balances of accounts and all of that. That puts you in July. Real substantive analysis of the budget, it puts you in July. Well, people got to get paid for 26, and you didn't pay the people for 26. By the time you get to the end of July, all the analysis you want to do, which might imply slowing down the process, you don't have support. You don't have public support. So you got to find another way to go after that kind of accountability rather than holding hostage the national budget. I'm not saying that it cannot be pursued, but it has to be done not during the budget season.
Do you have the political will to pursue it?
The will is there, but the mechanism to pursue it, the Liberian people still are not clear when you're pushing a controversial issue in the interest of the public, especially where you are going up against the administration, and the drive has the potential of exposing weaknesses of the administration. Then it's a battle. It has to be played before the public. The public patience is limited. It depends on who has the grip on the media. And with a minister like Lawrence Bropley, you got to know what you're doing. The president has Mr. Lawrence Bropley that will advocate for the executive every day. So if I wanted to champion something like that, I have to make sure that I have public opinion on my side, because I will be going up against a very popular President Salif and a very articulate, aggressive Minister of Information.
So
now, I'm not saying that it cannot be done. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that I'm giving you the parameters in which, as a politician, I have to weigh public opinion, and I cannot be seen as going against.
You don't want to rock the boat.
It's not rocking the boat. I need votes, and you must have the public with you. If you lose the public, no matter how humble your pursuit, if you lose the public, then you have to stand the battle alone. And in politics, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. It doesn't mean that you don't want to rock the boat. It means that you have to sharpen your arguments and convince the public that you are right and you're working for the public. And many of us don't know how to do that yet.
When you plan to start? Finally,
yes, sir.
There's been the argument, contention that legislative tenures are too long, and in a way stifles democracy and contributes to conflict. Interests become too entrenched, and people lose sight of the responsibility to their constituencies, and people become disenchanted. Where do you stand on this?
I don't think the legislative break is long. It's not too long. It's long, but it's not too long.
Not the break, the tenure. 9 years as a senator.
Oh, 9 year issue. Yes, I think 9 years is a little bit too long. And so a proposition has been made for us to amend the Constitution. That proposition is presently with the Senate. The House has passed it. It's supposed to be a joint resolution to trigger the referendum process. The House has passed the resolution. The Senate has not yet concurred. And in the resolution, one of the propositions is to amend that 9 year clause and put everything at 6 years. The public is not too aware of this. So we went on a break without concurring with that resolution. There are other things in the resolution, and this is one of them, adjusting that clause. So some of us, I shouldn't say we, In the Senate, I have not seen any of my colleagues who is actually against the idea. Again, it hasn't really hit the floor. But in the corridors, I get a feeling that most of us would not mind coming down to 6 years.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
How are you, ma'am?
Sharing so much with us. I have only one question. I'm also little. I have
A little
only one
louder,
question.
please.
And that question is, in answer to one of the commissioner's question, as to where
Can we
do you
adjust the
place
microphone a
yourself?
little bit?
I have a cold.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah. As to where do you place yourself, or how do you place yourself? You say you place yourself as day for yesterday, an activist, and then yesterday an advocate, and then today you are now a national decision maker.
Yes, ma'am.
Apart from being a national decision maker, of which you are personally engaged, my question is, what are some of the achievements of those two, the activists and the advocate? And if those opportunities were presented to you today, what will you want to change in your work as an activist and an advocate?
Well, this is at hindsight. One must give account of your activities of yesterday, so I need to do the same. I think all of us, every now and then, ought to do that. The songwriter said, count your blessings, name them one by one, and you will see what the Lord has done for you. I got involved in activism, and activism here means, my definition, agitating for change, agitating for things that I believe in, vocally, including demonstrating and all of that, void of violence. All of the things that the things that I agitated for during my days of activism was to influence government. I come from a part of the country where the voice of the people means nothing to superintendents, to commissioners, to lawmakers of the day in those days, and then to president. The voice of the people had no effect whatsoever. The voice of the people on the sidewalk, in those days I was on the sidewalk. I was not on the inside. Had no effect. The government was doing its own thing. So I started agitating, demonstrating, calling for change, calling for, you name it. And agitated very strongly, loudly too. I demonstrated, I was in the street, I held placards. Eventually, the agitation resulted to a collapse of the entire system. The government fell apart, society fell apart, war broke out. The breakout of the war was not intended. The coup that took place in 1980 was not intended. It came as a complete shock, suggesting that while I may have felt righteousness in my cause, I did not contemplate the consequence of the agitation to be that there was only one consequence that I expected, that the government will listen. And each time the government failed to listen, I intensified my agitation. I went as far as calling for the government of the day to resign. I never threw a stone, because stone throwing was not part of the agitation then. Eventually, the government was overthrown, surprisingly. And I was taken aback. What happened? So the government has been overthrown. Then we saw the execution on the beach. No, 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 no.